Barbarella was not just Roger Vadim's psychedelic science fiction fantasy about a sexy space adventurer. It was a production where the drinking of the director derailed filming, where Jane Fonda got drunk to strip naked because bulimia had destroyed her body confidence, and where birds attacked the star so viciously that production had to shut down. What you watched was campy, retro-futuristic fun. What you did not see was a troubled marriage playing out behind the cameras, a wife who hated her body while playing the ultimate sex symbol of cinema, and a film that bombed so badly it nearly destroyed careers. This was not just cheesy 1960s kitsch. It was personal torment, wrapped in plastic costumes and shot through tubes, while the stomach of Jane Fonda literally bled. Here are 20 weird, shocking, and almost unknown facts about Barbarella that reveal how one of the campiest cult classics of cinema was born from genuine suffering. And stick around for the bonus fact, because the band Duran Durand did not just take their name from the film, they brought back the villain actor for their own concert movie. Let us begin. Number 20. Jane Fonda got completely drunk to film the opening strip sequence. The iconic opening credits where Barbarella floats in zero gravity while slowly removing her spacesuit required Jane Fonda to lie on a massive piece of plexiglass with the spaceship background underneath her, filmed from above to create the illusion of weightlessness. Fonda was terrified, not of the technical setup or the height, but of being naked on camera. She admitted years later that she was totally drunk during filming because she literally did not know she could say no. Fonda suffered from severe bulimia throughout the production, having battled the eating disorder since age 12. Every morning she woke up convinced Vadim would realize he had made a terrible mistake casting her instead of Brigitte Bardot. The opening sequence required her to expose the body she hated to cameras, crew members, and eventually millions of viewers worldwide. "I was totally drunk," Fonda revealed in interviews and her autobiography. "I did so many things that I would rather die than do, but I did not know that I could say no. I literally did not know I could say no. I did not want anybody to know that I felt uncomfortable in my skin and that I hated my body." The alcohol was her only way to get through a scene that would define her career and haunt her for decades. Number 19. Roger Vadim started drinking heavily during production and made poor decisions. Fonda was not the only one drinking. Her husband and director, Roger Vadim, the man who had previously been married to Brigitte Bardot and transformed her into an international sex symbol, began drinking at lunch during the Barbarella shoot and never quite recovered his professional focus. Fonda detailed this in her autobiography, describing how production would grind to a near halt after midday meals. Partway through the filming of Barbarella, he started drinking at lunch, and we would never know what to expect after that, Fonda wrote. He was not falling down, but his words would slur and his decisions about how to shoot scenes often seemed ill-considered. The man who was supposed to be crafting a visually stunning science fiction spectacle was making creative choices while impaired, affecting everything from camera angles to actor direction. The drinking reflected deeper problems in their marriage. Vadim was trying to mold Fonda into another Bardot, the bombshell sex kitten he had created and then lost. Fonda was trying to please a husband who represented sophisticated European culture while battling her own insecurities about never measuring up to his ex-wife. The production became a pressure cooker where personal and professional dysfunction merged, with the drinking of Vadim just one visible symptom of a marriage and production both falling apart. Number 18. The bulimia of Jane Fonda was so severe she thought she would die before age 30. Throughout the production of Barbarella, Fonda was binging and purging 15 to 20 times daily. The eating disorder she had developed at age 12 in boarding school had become an all-consuming addiction that she believed would kill her. She genuinely did not expect to live past 30 years old. Yet here she was playing the ultimate embodiment of sexual confidence in cinema. The contrast between the character of Barbarella, sexually liberated, physically confident, completely comfortable in revealing costumes, and the actual psychological state of Fonda was devastating. There I was, a young woman who hated her body and suffered from terrible bulimia, playing a scantily clad, sometimes naked sexual heroine, she later reflected. Every revealing costume, every love scene, every moment when her body was on display felt like torture. Fonda described bulimia as living a secret life dominated by the disorder. The cycle of binging and purging created feelings of shame and loss of control that made authentic relationships nearly impossible. Even photographer David Hearn, who shot production stills, noted how insecure Fonda was about her appearance during photo shoots. Her eating disorder would not be conquered until her 40s, long after the release of Barbarella had cemented her status as a sex symbol. Number 17. 3 major actresses rejected the role before Fonda accepted. Sophia Loren, Brigitte Bardot, and Verna Lisi all turned down Barbarella before Vadim convinced his wife to take the role. The rejection of Bardot was particularly ironic. The character had been based on her by comic creator Jean-Claude Forest, and now she was refusing to play a role literally modeled after her. She did not want another sexualized part, having spent years trying to be taken seriously as an actress. Lauren was pregnant and felt the role was not right for her physical state or career trajectory. Lisi also rejected the sexualized nature of the character, understanding that playing Barbarella meant near-constant nudity and eroticism with little dramatic substance. All three actresses recognized what Fonda apparently did not, that this role could define and potentially limit a career. Vadim had to work hard to convince Fonda. She was not his first choice, which she knew and which fed into her insecurities. The role represented the attempt of Vadim to create another Bardot, and Fonda was acutely aware she was a replacement, a substitute for the woman Vadim had really wanted. That knowledge poisoned both the production and their marriage. Number 16. The production used sets and crew from Danger. Diabolic to save money. Producer Dino De Laurentiis was simultaneously producing another comic book adaptation, Danger, Diabolic, also starring John Philip Law. To save money, De Laurentiis reused sets, crew members, and equipment between both productions. Shooting began on Barbarella immediately after Danger. Diabolic wrapped on June 18, 1967, with sets like the nightclub of Valmont appearing in both films. This penny pinching created production headaches. The designers of Barbarella had to work around existing sets, retrofitting and repainting rather than building from scratch. The budget constraints forced creative compromises throughout, though paradoxically, the visual imagination of the film often succeeded despite or because of these limitations. The forced creativity produced some of the most memorable imagery of the film. De Laurentiis brought in screenwriters Brian Degas and Tudor Gates from Danger. Diabolic to punch up the dialogue of Barbarella, adding to the already crowded writer's room that would eventually credit 8 different screenwriters. The production became a masterclass in European co-production economics. Number 15. The script had 8 different writers and was never properly finished. Terry Southern wrote the initial screenplay, but his script changed drastically during filming. Eventually, 8 writers received credit: Southern, Vadim, Claude Brule, Vittorio Bonicelli, Clement Biddlewood, Brian Degas, Tudor Gates, and original comic creator Jean-Claude Forest. Charles B. Griffith worked uncredited, claiming he rewrote about a quarter of the film. Griffith added crucial conceptual elements: the millennia of peace that made Barbarella clumsy with weapons, her tendency to shoot herself in the foot, and the entire suicide room sequence with Claude Dauphin. Even co-star David Hemmings got involved, claiming he inspired the nonsense Fonda spouted during their sex scene. Terry Southern later said he was responsible for the opening striptease and the attacking doll robots. Fonda later admitted the script had not been worked out sufficiently in advance. She took sick days so the insurance of the film would cover production shutdowns while writers frantically edited the screenplay. This was not creative collaboration, it was barely controlled chaos. The production was shooting scenes while writers were still figuring out what those scenes should contain. Number 14. The bird attack was actually wrens and lovebirds that made Fonda sick. One of the most famous scenes of Barbarella involves her being attacked by mechanical birds that peck at her clothes. The original plan called for 2,000 hummingbirds, but the Pan American Tropical Bird Act of 1923 made it illegal to ship real hummingbirds overseas. So production substituted wrens and lovebirds, which were not cooperative and definitely were not vicious. The birds refused to attack Fonda convincingly, requiring multiple takes and increasing frustration. During this prolonged exposure to the birds, Fonda became genuinely ill, contracting what production reports called a virus, but was likely an allergic reaction or respiratory issue from extended bird contact. Variety reported on Barbarella laid low by Jane Fonda virus as production shut down while she recovered. Roger Ebert, visiting the set, found Fonda wrapped in a dressing gown and complaining she felt absolutely flayed alive. She had just endured a different torture, having plaster removed from her skin without proper underneath protection. The bird scene, the plaster removal, and constant physical demands were taking a genuine toll on her body beyond the psychological damage from performing while suffering bulimia. Number 13. The stomach of Jane Fonda was skinned raw during the plastic tube scene. In the film, people travel through plastic tubes propelled by compressed air. For the scene where Barbarella gets shot through tubes, Fonda had to slide through actual plastic tubing at high speed. The first take skinned her stomach on the plastic, causing genuine injury and bleeding. Ebert's on-set report captured Fonda explaining, "My tummy was sore to begin with. My stomach got skinned on the plastic. Ouch." Vadim decided to try again with talcum powder sprinkled inside the tube. This time it worked so well that Fonda hurtled out the other end of the tube with even more force, though presumably without additional injuries. The physical comedy required genuine physical suffering. The scraped stomach of Fonda was not makeup or acting, it was actual damaged flesh from a dangerous practical effect. The incident exemplified how the production prioritized visual spectacle over performer safety. Vadim wanted authenticity, wanted Fonda actually sliding through tubes at speed, and was willing to injure his wife to get that shot. The fact that Fonda went through it twice shows both the recklessness of the production and the inability of Fonda to say no. Number 12. The excessive machine scene used explosions Fonda and O'Shea were not warned about. The excessive machine, the torture device of Dr. Durand Durand that kills people with orgasmic pleasure, required a scene where Barbarella survives sensory overload that should have been fatal. To make the malfunction of the machine look dramatic, the prop was rigged with flares and smoke bombs. Vadim deliberately did not tell Jane Fonda or Milo O'Shea about the explosions. Vadim wanted us to look natural, so he did not tell us what a big explosion there would be, Fonda explained. When the devices detonated, the shock and surprise of the actors were completely genuine because they had been kept ignorant of what was about to happen. This was not method direction, it was dangerous manipulation that could have caused serious injuries or psychological trauma. The excessive machine scene became one of the most iconic moments of the film, with Durand Durand infuriated as Barbarella outlasts his pleasure torture device. But that authentic surprise on the face of Fonda came from her husband deliberately exposing her to unexpected explosions while she was strapped into an elaborate prop. Number 11. Fonda was hung upside down in vats of oil and dry ice. Other physically demanding scenes included suspending Fonda upside down in enormous vats filled with oil and dry ice. The combination created dramatic visual effects, fog and liquid, combining around her suspended body but subjected Fonda to genuinely uncomfortable and potentially dangerous conditions. Dry ice can cause frostbite and respiratory issues in enclosed spaces. The approach of the production to practical effects consistently put Fonda in hazardous situations. She spent hours hanging from wires for flying scenes, a common technique at the time, but one that was tiring and sometimes uncomfortable, according to production reports. The wires were often painful, and she had to maintain specific poses while suspended, her body weight supported by minimal harnesses. Throughout Barbarella, the body of Fonda was treated as a prop to be manipulated, suspended, exposed, and subjected to various discomforts for visual effect. The campy tone of the film obscures how genuinely difficult the production was physically, especially for a woman already suffering from severe body dysmorphia and eating disorders. Number 10. John Philip Law was cast after Vadim saw him emerge from a pool. Law was not originally cast as Pygar, the blind angel. Vadim made the decision spontaneously, after seeing Law emerge from a swimming pool at the motel in Florida, where Fonda was shooting Hurry Sundown. Fonda recalled in her autobiography, during his brief stay, while sitting around the motel pool, he saw the lean, tanned, blue-eyed John Philip Law emerge from the water like a piece of sculpture, and he decided then and there that he was the one to play Barbarella's Pygar. This casting by physique approach characterized the entire aesthetic of Vadim. He was not interested in acting ability or dramatic range. He wanted bodies that looked right, sculptures that moved. The wooden, deliberately deadpan performance of Law as Pygar became part of the camp charm of the film, but it reflected the priorities of Vadim, visual beauty over dramatic substance. The spontaneous casting decision worked out commercially. Law and Fonda had appeared together in Hurry Sundown, establishing a rapport that translated to their scenes together. But it exemplified how the production of Barbarella operated on impulse and aesthetic instinct rather than careful planning. Number 9. The budget of the film varies wildly depending on source. Different sources cite vastly different production budgets, $3 million, $4 million, or $9 million. This discrepancy reflects both the international co-production financing structure and creative accounting practices. The film was a French-Italian co-production distributed by Paramount, with money coming from multiple sources and different entities tracking different costs. The budget confusion also reflects how De Laurentiis structured financing across multiple projects. Money from Danger, Diabolic, Arabella, and Anzio all flowed through similar channels, making precise per-film accounting difficult. Paramount's involvement should have made Barbarella expensive, but Vadim was persona non grata with the studio, paying off $20,000 installments from a previous 3-picture deal he had abandoned. Regardless of the exact figure, Barbarella was expensive enough that its commercial performance mattered significantly. The initial box office of $2.5 million in North America looked disappointing, ranking only 46th in annual United States rentals. But the film eventually reached $5.5 million domestically and performed well internationally. Number 8. the film was condemned by the National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures. The National Catholic Office for Motion Pictures gave Barbarella a condemned rating, calling it a sick, heavy-handed fantasy with nudity and graphic representations of sadism. They specifically criticized the Production Code Administration for approving the film, arguing it violated standards that should have protected audiences from such content. The condemnation reflected genuine moral panic about the sexual content of the film. Barbarella depicted not just nudity but polymorphous sexuality, casual encounters without emotional attachment, and the equation of the excessive machine of pleasure and death. For 1968, even in a sexually liberating decade, this was genuinely transgressive material appearing in a mainstream theatrical release. The controversy helped the film commercially in some markets while hurting it in others. Content restrictions denied its sales to United States television, limiting long-term profitability. When the film was re-released in 1977 after Star Wars revived the commercial viability of science fiction, Paramount edited it to obtain a PG rating and subtitled it Queen of the Galaxy, removing nudity to reach wider audiences. Number 7. Jean-Claude Forest worked 8 months on production design but was not happy. The original comic creator Jean-Claude Forest spent 8 months closely participating in the production design of Barbarella. "I was completely involved," Forest said in a 1985 interview. "At that time, I did not care about my strip. What really interested me was the movie business." He praised the Italian artist who could build anything in an extremely short time and watched all the daily rushes. But Forest was not satisfied with the final product. "The choices that were made for the final cut from those images were not the ones I would have liked," he admitted, "but I was not the director." The vision of Forrest for how his creation should be adapted did not align with the camp aesthetic and sexual focus of Vadim. The comic had adventure and eroticism, but Vadim emphasized the latter over the former. Forrest had based Barbarella on Brigitte Bardot, so watching Jane Fonda, the current wife of Vadim, play a character inspired by the ex-wife of Vadim created strange psychological layers. Forrest witnessed Vadim attempting to recreate the Bardot mystique with Fonda, a project doomed by the completely different personality of Fonda and the inability of Vadim to let go of his most famous creation. Number 6. The voice of Anita Pallenberg was completely dubbed by Joan Greenwood. Anita Pallenberg, the girlfriend of Keith Richards and a Rolling Stones insider, played the Black Queen and Great Tyrant with stunning visual presence. But audiences never heard her actual voice. Vadim had her performance completely dubbed by British actress Joan Greenwood, whose distinctive plummy contralto became the voice of the Queen. The dubbing decision may have reflected concerns of Vadim about the voice of Pallenberg not matching his vision for the character, or simply practical post-production choices common in international co-productions. Whatever the reason, the performance of Pallenberg became a collaboration between her physical presence and the vocal performance of Greenwood, splitting the character between two performers. Terry Southern suggested Pallenberg for the role after encountering her while working with the Rolling Stones. Her casting brought counterculture credibility to the production. Pallenberg was genuinely cool in ways Hollywood actresses were not, connected to the most important rock band of the era. That authenticity showed in her performance, even though her voice was replaced. Number 5. Marceau played against type in a very talky role. The most famous mime of the world, Marceau, was cast as Professor Ping in a role requiring extensive dialogue. This casting against type amused everyone involved, taking an artist famous for silence and making him speak constantly. The thick French accent and theatrical delivery of Marceau added to the deliberately artificial tone of the film. The joke worked because audiences recognized the contradiction. Marceau was not just any actor playing a scientist, he was the mime playing a chatty professor, and that incongruity created humor beyond the actual jokes of the script. His performance became another layer of camp, another element of the deliberate artificiality of the film. The presence of Marceau also gave Barbarella cultural prestige it might otherwise have lacked. Here was a genuine artist, recognized internationally for his craft, appearing in psychedelic science fiction camp. His participation suggested the film was serious art disguised as trash, or at least interesting trash worth the time of serious artists. Number 4. The band Durand Durand named themselves after the film the day after British Broadcasting Corporation broadcast. Childhood friends John Taylor and Nick Rhodes formed their band on October 21st, 1978, the day after the British Broadcasting Corporation broadcast Barbarella on October 20th, 1978. They named themselves after Dr. Durand Durand, the villain character of Milo O'Shea, though they dropped one D and changed the spelling to Durand Durand for a more stylized feel. The connection of the band to the film deepened over the years. Their 1997 song Electric Barbarella directly referenced the movie, and their 1984 concert film Arena featured Milo O'Shea reprising his Dr. Durand Durand role. In the concert film, the character crash lands on Earth and is surprised to find teenagers chanting his name, only to realize they are chanting for the pop group. The name choice of the band reflected how Barbarella had permeated pop culture despite its commercial disappointment. By the late 70s, the film had achieved cult status through television broadcasts and repertory screenings, becoming a touchstone for a generation that embraced camp aesthetics. Durand Durand recognized something in the psychedelic vision of Vadim that connected to their own new wave sensibility. Number 3. David Gilmour of Pink Floyd was a session musician on the soundtrack. Charles Fox and Bob Crewe composed the Lounge and Exotica soundtrack of Barbarella, but they employed numerous session musicians, including future Pink Floyd guitarist David Gilmour. Gilmour was an unknown studio player in 1968, taking work wherever he could find it before joining Pink Floyd later that year. The soundtrack has been described as embodying 1960s music sensibility with a fun and futuristic approach. Bob Crewe, who had composed Four Seasons hits like Big Girls Do Not Cry, brought pop craftsmanship to science fiction scoring. The Bob Crewe generation, a group of session musicians, provided much of the instrumental work. The music contributed significantly to the psychedelic atmosphere of Barbarella. The lounge stylings, the exotica flourishes, the mod pop sensibility, all of it created an aural landscape as distinctive as the visual design. The soundtrack obtained its own cult following, existing as a document of late 60s aesthetics independent of the film. Number 2. The film failed commercially but became a cult classic through reissues. The original review of Variety called Barbarella a failure with a cast that is not particularly adept at comedy, a flat script, and direction which cannot get this beached whale afloat. The initial $2.5 million North American gross looked disastrous against the production budget. Critics dismissed it as a mix of poor special effects and the Marquis de Sade. But the 1977 Star Wars-inspired reissue took in handsome grosses, introducing Barbarella to new audiences who understood camp aesthetics better than 1968 viewers had. Home video transformed the commercial fortunes of the film completely. By the 80s, it was a staple of video stores, discovered by viewers who appreciated its excess rather than being confused by it. The cult status reflected changing attitudes towards 60s, psychedelia, and sexual liberation. What seemed garish and excessive in 1968 became charmingly retro by the 80s. The costumes that looked ridiculous became iconic fashion. The camp that embarrassed critics became a virtue. The failure of Barbarella transformed into success by waiting for audiences to catch up with the aesthetic of Vadim. Number 1. Jane Fonda later regretted choosing Barbarella over major hit films. Fonda has lamented turning down starring roles in 2 major hits, Bonnie and Clyde and Rosemary's Baby, to stay in France and make Barbarella with Vadim. Both films became cultural landmarks that defined 1968 cinema. Both offered dramatic roles that would have showcased her talents rather than just her body. Both represented career paths she sacrificed for the vision of a husband. The regret goes beyond just missing commercial successes. Bonnie and Clyde and Rosemary's Baby were serious films that changed American cinema, while Barbarella became a punchline respected by some, mocked by many, always defined primarily by sexuality and camp. Fonda was trying to be taken seriously as an actress, yet she chose the project that would typecast her as a sex kitten. The decision exemplified how she molded herself into each man that she married. As documentary filmmaker Susan Lacey observed, Fonda chose the priorities of Vadim over her own career judgment, stayed in France for his benefit, and played a role designed to recreate the mystique of his ex-wife. The pattern of subordinating her own interests to those of her husband would continue through multiple marriages before she finally claimed independence and creative control in her later career. Bonus fact: Milo O'Shea reprised his role in Durand Durand's 1984 concert film. The connection between Barbarella and Durand Durand went beyond just the name of the band. When Duran Durand created their 1984 concert and concept film Arena, they convinced Milo O'Shea to reprise his role as Dr. Durand Durand. The aging villain crash lands on planet Earth during the concert, bewildered to find thousands of screaming teenagers chanting his name until he realizes they are not chanting for him but for the band named after him. The metatextual joke worked because O'Shea played it completely straight, maintaining the same pompous villainy he had brought to Barbarella 16 years earlier. He was not winking at the audience or acknowledging the absurdity. He committed fully to the character, making the joke work through complete sincerity amid total ridiculousness. The appearance demonstrated how deeply Barbarella had penetrated 80s pop culture. Here was an original cast member from a cult film appearing in a concert movie by a band named after his character, creating a pop culture Ouroboros where the film inspired the band who then recreated the film. The relationship between Barbarella and Durand Durand became symbiotic, each keeping the other relevant for new audiences. The willingness of O'Shea to participate showed how the reputation of the film had transformed. In 1968, appearing in Barbarella was potentially embarrassing for serious actors. By 1984, it was cool, a mark of having been part of something that transcended initial commercial failure to become culturally significant. O'Shea embraced the camp legacy rather than running from it. Barbarella endures because Roger Vadim understood that the future would not be clean, logical, or sensible. It would be excessive, sexual, and utterly bizarre. He created a film that confused 1968 audiences, but spoke perfectly to later generations who recognized that style matters as much as substance, that camp can be art, and that sometimes the most interesting films emerge from troubled productions where personal demons and creative visions collide. If this deep dive into 60s psychedelic cinema revealed how personal suffering can fuel pop culture immortality, go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes revelations that prove the most memorable films often come from the most troubled shoots.